Hello, Internet, and thank you very much for tuning into the cloudnative.fm podcast. And today, what we are talking about, we're talking about Prometheus and Robusta. So today's agenda is all about Robusta open source project, succeeding with Prometheus on Kubernetes using Robusta. So, what are the common challenges when using Prometheus on Kubernetes? How can you get up and running faster? What are the right alerts to define for your microservices? In today's podcast, I am joined by Natan Yellin, the co founder of Robusta.dev. He will speak about Prometheus in general as well as Robusta, the latest and greatest feature pop out recently, and work to make Prometheus easier to use on Kubernetes. Thank you very much for being on the show, Natan.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be back.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thank you, Adorato Ocha, for joining us. Good morning. I mean the good night, but good morning to you as well. So we this is actually episode number 2 on the Cloud Native FM. This is the Kubernetes troubleshooting made easy with Robusta. I think we're back in August or this year. We have discussed a lot about it. So this is another episode you can tune into it. But today's is all about Robusta and open source Prometheus projects. So Nathan, can you tell us about your journey for being into the observability guy and how you started your learning journey into the Prometheus world?
Yeah, so so much has happened since the last time. I guess the biggest thing that has happened actually has nothing to do with Prometheus. I'm going to be a father, so that's the big exciting thing in my life. And that has happened in Robusta too, as well, though. So to speak a little bit about my own journey, then I was always the guy who was the developer, but who got pulled a little bit into DevOps stuff. So I was like the person who would set up the first Jenkins server in different divisions that I worked in. It ended up dealing a little bit with DevOpsy like stuff, even though it wasn't always called that. And most recently, I was at a startup that did Kubernetes security. And for us, like the way that we worked with alerts was we had this Slack channel that had like a million Prometheus alerts that got spilled there. And we didn't always know exactly what to do with them. And when you have a Slack channel that has that many alerts and you don't always know what to do with them, then you have this constant like shitty feeling that there's something there that you should be looking at, but you're not. And you keep procrastinating looking at it because you know there's too much stuff to really go through. And it's a little bit confusing and hard to understand what really matters. So when we started Robusta, we wanted to really take what's working about Prometheus and take like a great time series database in the learning system, but put it on an observability platform on top of that.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I think like for the alerting is always been a challenging for a lot of folks. First is like what sort of alert you provide to your developers. It's going like if you tell people if you send Kubernetes get events to your developers, it's so much information in there. So it really you drill down into the pieces, what actually causes the problem. So I think there is a pain for a lot of developer to understand like there's a kubectl cat event, kubectl describe command, something bad happen, what causes the Kubernetes pod to crashes, what sequence event happens for the pod to be crashed. So there's not much going on until you came up with Robusta. So now tell us about what Robusta open source project is and how it leverages open source project Prometheus.
Yeah, okay, so excellent question. So what we do at the heart is there are two parts of Robusta. There's a SaaS platform that gives you an all-in-one pane of glass, like for a lot of different clusters, and we'll speak about that later on. But before that, there's an open source runbook automation engine, and that's a bit of a mouthful, but I'm going to break it down for you. What that open source engine does is it takes alerts, and it could be your existing alerts, or it could be the alerts that we define for you out of the box, and it tells you why they happen. So normally when you get an alert, then you get an alert saying, okay, this alert fired, and here are a bunch of labels that you can use to then like cross-correlate it with other stuff. So you could take the labels from that alert and you can jump over to Elasticsearch and start digging through the logs. You could go and you can run kubectl get events, and you can try and figure stuff out. And what we're doing with Robusta is we're automating that process. So we're taking an alert and we're automatically showing you why it occurs. Now you froze up for a second, so I don't know if that's an issue on my end, or if can you hear me?
No, it's I think yes, absolutely, absolutely. I think it's my end. Internet connection, some cachy. But I get your point. Absolutely, absolutely. So it's definitely so. If you have some demos or your slide deck, you can please share with us because I see there's a lot of recent updates into the Robusta. So I would definitely see because when the last time we see there's not much, but today so much of the stuff is available on Robusta side as well. And also I will provide the link to your KubeCon talk, and that's really
Yeah, thank
important.
you very much. So I
Building
want to
a
start.
run book, yeah,
Oh no, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
yes.
What I want to
So
do is I want
building
to
a
start.
run book automation system for
Sorry, the DAG is we keep talking over each other because of the DAG, so apologies on that. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to start with not I want to start with one slide from my KubeCon talk, and thank you very much for also putting that link there. So I'm going to start with my favorite website on the internet, of course, probably all of our favorite website, which is Reddit. And on Reddit, there's this subreddit called "What Is This Thing?" And people put here these posts where they take a picture of something and they say, you know, what is this thing? So someone says, like, I found here a thing in my bag of crisps. What's this thing? And one time someone posted that they found this thing in their attic, and it's this box that says here radioactive material. No person shall remain within 1 meter of this container unnecessarily. And if you find this, you're supposed to, like, I don't know, call someone else, and like it's an emergency situation. So I think this is really good as a representative, as a metaphor for that alert that hits your Slack channel. You get something, and like at first glance, this could be a major crisis. Like there could be some issue that's going to take all of your production down. And the natural instinct that many of us have is to like freak out and say, okay, like, whoa, radioactive material, like let's call the police, let's call everyone over. And like I can zoom in here and I can like go and read through the story here on Reddit and see what happened. And if I like go through the story here, then like at first they freaked out, and then like the guys with the spacesuits came out with the radioactive spacesuits to like measure everything with the Geiger counters, and it's like this is a full-blown incident now in like Kubernetes and Prometheus terms. Like this is a major incident. You think production might be down, something major is happening, and after this whole investigation, it turned out that it wasn't a big deal. It was just some leftover paint that was like slightly radioactive. In the old days, they painted watches with radium that was a little radioactive, but it's not something that's going to kill you. Like, okay, don't nick the box, but like you're okay. And that's representative of what we're trying to do with the Robusta. What we're trying to do with the Robusta is we're trying to take the alerts that hit your Slack channel and automatically give you the context for what those alerts mean, whether it's something that you need to react to immediately, whether it's something you can sleep on and deal with tomorrow. And that type of contextualization is what we do with the technology called runbook automation. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. That's a super analogy to talk about Robusta because it's always been challenging to see what sort of alert because let's say because when something is down, there might be a sequence of steps that causes the whole production system to go down, and you can track those events, like you can prepare for the biggest disaster as of this analogy you tell with the radioactive. And plus, if you have some context wrap around it, then you tell like this is not a big deal, let's do relax and fix after a few days. So I think it's a double sword. Like sometimes you feel a little bit depressed, and sometimes if you have a context around that, uh, on the alerting mechanism, you have a context that tells you it's not a big deal, stay relaxed, focus on things, and let's fix that in a future time. So it's a wonderful analogy, and that's the same analogy you draw in your KubeCon talk, but it's been a super good analogy to address a Robusta.
It is. It is. So I'm stealing slides again a little bit from my KubeCon talk, but I think it really is a great analogy for what we do and why we do it. So I'm not going to go through my KubeCon talk. I'm just going to give one quick example here, like to make this now, bring this down and not speak about radioactive boxes, but to speak about Kubernetes. So like if you take an alert like this, that there's a pod that's crash looping in production, you're missing context here. You're missing details on why that's crashing, what to do about it. And when you think about how real world organizations work, especially companies that are starting to grow, so you go beyond like a 10-person company, or you're a 50-person startup now, or you're even a little bit larger than that, or you're an enterprise company, there are a whole lot of different people. And when an alert like this arrives in production, then the trick is to get that alert as fast as possible to the right person who can actually do something about it. And that's where contextualization also really plays a role, because without contextualization, then the wrong person receives this alert. They have to now connect to production, and in larger companies, connecting to production can be a pain, and not everyone always has the credentials. They have to start troubleshooting this and pulling in data about why this occurred, and then they have to pass the ball off to the right person who actually has the knowledge and understanding and like the capability to fix this. So let's say the most simple question, like when this arrives, the first question I'll have is this an infra issue? Is this an issue for the application developers? I want to know, did someone else update this application recently? Was there a change there that I should be aware of that caused this issue? So like all those questions are questions that using runbook automation, we can really easily contextualize. So let me show you what it would look like with the Robusta open source instead of this. So instead of this, what you would get is you would get a message here about a crashing pod. And you would get a message here that includes the built-in logs and has details about exactly what happened. And by seeing this right here in Slack, or in Ops Genie or PagerDuty or MS Teams or all the other places that people consume alerts, by seeing this right here, we're giving you the context now to decide how you triage this, where you're going to hand it off to, and what the immediate next step is. And of course, this isn't always enough, and I'll show more on that in a second. But I should stop here for a moment.
No, absolutely, definitely. Like if you look at the if you look at the event, like if I can give the same kubectl get event list to my, let's say, SRE or a developer who actually want to fix this, he doesn't able to understand what is happening in those junky lines of code unless you wrap around it. And there might be he can spend 3-4 hours to figure out what actually causes the pod to crashes down. But if you wrap a context around it, you can give us some label like this happens and that's why the pod is crashes. He can ultimately see from those label like this is a thing that causes the pod to crashes, and he can fix this in a 5 or yes, Natan, go ahead with the presentation.
Yeah, sorry, there was a connection issue. I lost you there. I don't know. It might be on my end, me. But okay, I'll go ahead. I'll address also the example you gave. Okay, so here's an example where we have a pod that's in pending state, and this Prometheus alert is firing. So the alert here is just called QPod not ready. And this is actually, oh, it's not an exact same alert, but you can imagine if it was just in standard Prometheus, then you would get something that looks really entirely just like this. It would say here QPod not ready. But when QPod not ready, what you want to do is you want to go and you want to run kubectl get events. So why can't we run it for you? That's exactly what we do here. So we go and we run for you kubectl get events, and then you can see here 0 out of 8 nodes are available. 8 nodes didn't match the pod's node affinity selector. And now I want to go in and I want to see the details on this. So I can click here. That'll take you over to the SaaS platform. And now I can drill down and I can investigate and I can see what's going on over here. And I can see each of the individual pods. And if they're running, I can graph stuff. And I can see that this is impending. So the ability here is to like go from in Slack the immediate context and the contextualization and how we wrap it and seeing what's going on. And then to jump over like with a click right to a SaaS platform. And of course, this can be deployed on-prem if you have like security needs where you can't send data out of your environment. But to jump over to a SaaS platform and then be able to go in here and dive down and really understand what's going on. So I'll give another example of that. Let's say I have a crashing pod, then I can go in here and I can see like before in this one SaaS platform, I can see that a pod crashed and I can see the logs and I can give all the developers access to this without giving them access to the actual cluster. So they can get read-only access over here. But I can do more than that. We said before how sometimes something changes and sometimes what causes something to crash is that change. So we can contextualize that as well. I can see here all the exact changes that we made to your application, who made them and when. And having that context lets me understand, first of all, who should I raise the phone to and who should I speak to, but also what are the changes that could have led up to this pod crashing. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. That is super, super helpful because I want to see like what is the previous state and what is my next state between when the event when there's a error appear. So that's platform give you those kinds of availabilities as well. So I think this is super cool. And also I think like if you go to the Slack channel, you can remediate your action by pushing a button on top of it, or it's you can do it automatically as well.
Yeah, so great question. So over here we have two buttons. One is investigate and one is silence. In general, though, you can actually add more buttons here. So we make it easy to add buttons here. Like a good example of that we have, I think, built in. I didn't set up a demo for this, but that we have built in is, let's say your HPA reaches the maximum number of replicas, then you can click a button to up that maximum by 30%. Oh, I think we disable that by default. Now remember, we disable that by default because some people don't want to do it, but we make it easy to enable if you want to get a message about that. We're like really sensitive to how we fine tune the alerts out of the box. We put a lot of effort into making sure that alerts aren't too spammy out of the box. And of course, we can always improve in this. This is like an ongoing journey, and we're always working to make the alerts better. And we pull in alerts from Prometheus stack and other places and try and improve them. So like we try hard to make sure that like for most people, what you get out of the box will just work and won't need tweaking. So some stuff we enable or disable by default based on what we think most people will need, but then we make it easy for you to customize. But getting back to these action buttons, then you can see up here on top, I have these two buttons here by default for this alert. One is investigate, which we already saw, and the other is silence. And Prometheus has an excellent, excellent silencing mechanism. So you can take an alert that's too spammy and you can silence it really easily. The problem is people often don't silence stuff because it's like annoying to do. Like it's really easy to do, but you have to open up connection to the alert manager and then start to define stuff and copy over the labels. So sometimes people don't do it, even though it's so easy and it's like such a quick win for cutting down the noise in your Slack channel. So that's why like our philosophy is, okay, well, if we want to encourage you to silence noisy stuff, it has to be one click. So one click, we pre-fill it. Let's say you have a bunch of clusters and a bunch of Prometheus instances. You can silence like 10 clusters, an alert from 10 clusters at once. You can say how long to silence it for. You can change the labels, but we pre-fill it with what we think are the correct values for you. So our general philosophy is like be opinionated, but give escape hatches. So we'll pre-fill it, but we let you modify. Now, one other area that I'll talk about is a big part of what we do is around multi-cluster. So when you look at how organizations operate today and how organizations operate today at scale, then we see increasingly large numbers of organizations that don't deploy Kubernetes apps on a single cluster. They deploy Kubernetes apps in multi-cluster environments. And they take an application and they want to run the same application maybe on GKE and on AWS. Maybe they want to get there some redundancy, or maybe they start off on one cloud and then they migrate to another cloud. We work with a lot of startups who have initial funding and initial credits on one cloud and they want to move to another cloud. So it's a multi-cloud world. And a lot of the traditional tools require you to work on one cluster at a time. And that way of working doesn't match the way that companies want to work today. So we have here embedded everywhere in the platform, we have here all the clusters that something is running on. And we have here as well the ability to always drill down to a specific cluster. And let me show also like an example of that. Let's say you have an application that's running across all these different clusters, and you want to see, let's say, the memory or the CPU usage of the pods that are part of that application. So normally you would have to go and pull that data in from a few different Prometheuses, and we make that really easy to do, where we can pull in the data from all those different Prometheus servers into one place, and we can give you a single pane of glass for all your clusters. So I'm curious actually how much you see that, but I mean, it seems like it's really a multi-cluster world today. And for us, like that's a niche where we want to be best in class.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. I think like it's as of today, multi-cluster is a thing, and if you think about, there's a Kubernetes running on top of those different cluster. Let's in Azure Kubernetes service or EKS Kubernetes service. There is alert happening all the time, and you can't figure out like where is actually the error occur. But having a unified dashboard is really a so is a big deal for a lot of SRE and DevOps team as well. So also, can you like is there is like how much like is do you support all the Kubernetes clusters in the cloud in EKS GK, because there's so many digital Kubernetes ocean. So how much of the support is available as of today, and plus like is a bandwidth like you can incorporate two cluster multi-cluster at a time, or how much of the capacity is actually you supporting as of today?
You can put on whatever cluster you want. Give me an API server I can talk to, and I'll be
Oh,
happy. So I don't care
wow.
if it's GKE. I don't care if it's OpenShift. I don't care if it's I don't know, some Cube ADM cluster you set up on your Raspberry Pi. We have people running on Robusta on those. Give me an API server that I can talk to, and I'll support it. I like to say that Kubernetes is like an operating system. So we don't care what the hardware is. Like the hardware, figuratively speaking, is like AWS, or it's Google Cloud, or it's your Raspberry Pi, or it's your on-prem servers. We don't care what the hardware is, as long as the software, so to speak, is Kubernetes. Then we support it. And then it ties back into what we were saying over here, though, about multi-cluster. Like you could have this running on multiple clusters. Maybe in the example I set up here, I only put on one cluster. But you could have the same application running on all these different clusters. Each of them can even have their own Prometheus instance. And a lot of times people then they have trouble getting one single pane of glass into all those different clusters. And then you have to start shipping from all those different Prometheuses to a central Prometheus. And that's a good way to do it. You can do it that way, but we also provide a lot of companies with a shortcut where you can go and you can say, okay, well, I have Prometheus in each cluster. I'll give you a single pane of glass, and I'll just query the information from all those clusters and make it seamless. Because those clusters come up and they come down. I mean, people have a lot of dynamic clusters these days. And then one thing, this doesn't tie into Prometheus as much as it ties into that multi-cluster world. So one thing that surprised us a little bit, because it wasn't really our focus in terms of alerting, but people would say, okay, well, I have an alert that's occurring on one cluster, but it's not occurring on another cluster. And for us, this turned out to be an interesting question to answer, because it overlaps with two things we care about. One, alerting and why alerts are occurring. And two, the fact that we really do multi-cluster so well. So what you can do is you can take multiple clusters or multiple namespaces in the same cluster. It's the same to us. And you can say, okay, well, I have an application running in both of these. How do they differ? Is there drift there? And then we make it easy to see, if you have this multi-cluster world where you have a multi-tenant application and you're running 100 copies of it, is there one copy of that application that is different than the others? Is there drift between these two clusters or between these two tenants? And then why isn't it maybe firing on one of those but not firing on the other one? So that's another thing that we've, I guess, added since the last time I was here as well, that really touches on those pain points around multi-cluster.
Yes, and another question I try to ask is let's if somebody is there is people are leveraging as of today is if they want to use developer portals, if they want to
I think I lost you. Again, I'm not sure if it's on my end or your end, but I think I lost you for a second over there.
Okay, sorry. So I'm just asking a quick, asking a quick question here. If somebody is using, we
Well, I seem to have lost you again. I'm not sure why, but I got company over here that's inbound. So can you try one more time with that question? And sorry about that. I just keeps cutting out at the wrong moment.
Yes, I think it's issue on my end because I am some traveling a lot. Okay, that's why. But I just asking a quick question. Like, if somebody there are some companies here, they wanted your own developer portals, own their own dashboard, and let's say if they want to use Robustas to these kind of alerting. So, is there a mechanism? There is a wave called backstages in these days. You can integrate your services into the backstages. So that's question is relative to the backstage environment. Like, can you make a plugin of Robusta and put it in inside the backstage, and people can use the same environment to developers, SRE, DevOps, anybody can see the same dashboard and use the same services of the Robusta.
We haven't done it yet. Oh man, my cat is like okay. We haven't done it yet, but if someone comes and they open the ticket on GitHub, and then they can like jump on a call with our product and speak a little bit about it. I know we're an open source project, but like we still want to get on the call and like understand the use case so we solve it the right way. So if someone wants to jump on the call with us and discuss it, then yeah, I mean we'd love to do that.
Yes, good, good, good. Definitely. I think people would, I think there might be people listening to us might be interesting in because I see a backstage free courses pop up in the Linux Foundation as well. So there's a lot of wave going on in the backstage environment. Another one good, cool things want to address, like if somebody, like say, if I want to just just send the notification to the development team, not the SRE team, not any other team. I see we can send Slack messages to the different channels, but is there a way that the alert is going to the particularly this person, this name, and not going anywhere else?
Yeah, so there are two ways you can do it. The first way is if you modify your Prometheus rules, then you can set up a Prometheus route. Sorry, you can set up a Prometheus routing receiver and do it that way. And then we also give a way of doing it with Robusta. And like it's a matter of preference which of those you prefer. So you could either do it with Prometheus like routes and receivers, or you could like send it all through Robusta. And then with Robusta, we also have a way to do that fairly easily. I'm gonna see if I can pull up the docs on that. Let me see. Okay, I need to look through and see where maybe we can drop it in the comments afterwards. But yeah, we make it easy to do that as well. So you can define a routing rule. And you can say like these are their send over here and these are their send over here, and then the right person always gets the right alert.
Yes. Another cool question, like what sort of the different events are you supporting as of today? There is pod crashing event, there's a node, there is a application auto scaling, vertical scaling. There's so many events. So can you pop up a list of events that as of today the Robusta open source project is supporting? And plus you can add some what is more in the enterprise offering as well.
Yeah, so excellent question. And let me open that up over here. 1 second. And I'm just going to go over here to our Helm chart. So we essentially, though, pull in two different types of data. We pull in data directly from the API server. For example, when you monitor kills, then we monitor out of memory kills via the API server. And then the second way that we do stuff is we monitor it via Prometheus alerts. So it's like two different ways that you can monitor something. You can monitor it by defining taking a Prometheus metric and then monitoring that metric, or you can monitor it by looking at a discrete event, like if here was a single kill or here a job failed, and then monitor it that way. So we give you the flexibility when you define stuff yourself to monitor it either way. And when we go and we define stuff out of the box, then we define it using a mix of both. And I'm just going to go in here to the Helm chart, and I'm going to show some of the stuff that we define out of the box for you. And I'm going to focus here. The stuff that appears here is not just the stuff we monitor. There's some stuff we monitor that doesn't like get special treatment, like default alerts we just passed through. But I want to focus on the stuff here that we monitor that we give special treatment for, where we do that runbook automation, where we do that contextualization. We take an event and we add on all that context. So the first one here is an example of an unkilled pod. You can see here that there's an unkilled pod, and we're rate limiting this so it doesn't fire too often. And we're listening to the API server here. So there's a trigger that's on an unkilled pod. And we don't fire that more than once every 900 seconds. And when this happens, then we pull in using an action called the umkiller enricher, we pull in data about that umkill, we pull in data about the graph, and we pull in the memory usage on the node that happened on. And if I just show that in Slack, you can see up here an example of that fired. So here's what that looks like. So I got here an alert about a pod that was unkilled, and I can see the memory usage on the node. So it spiked up over here, spiked up previously in the past. That was possibly a different unkill. That's on the node. And I can see the memory usage for this specific container. So here's my memory usage, and I spike up, and I'm approaching the memory limit. And probably this spiked up right here at the last second and went over the memory limit, but we didn't manage to scrape the data from Prometheus in time. And this is a synthetic example. It's like a demo example. But when you look at real world data of this, and like you see over time a memory leak, and that has a very specific profile that you can identify easily. And then we're pulling in other data here as well. And we're telling you like, okay, what node was this running on? What was the node doing at the time? Was the issue on the node? Was the issue on the container? And we're pulling in this context to help you understand why something got unkilled. So that's an example of something that we do out of the box. And that's essentially what we're defining over here in this runbook automation. And then if I go down a bit, then we're looking here, for example, at a pod that was crash looping, and we're pulling in the Kubernetes events, so kubectl events, and we're pulling in the Kubernetes logs. If I go down more, then we have kube CPU overcommit. And over here, we're pulling in some specific data about that CPU overcommit and why it happens. And then we've also started doing something lately. Some of these alerts are like rather esoteric, and people don't always know what they mean. So we're starting to do something where we send you to, we put in the alert, like there's a link, quick link, and you can get to a 60-second, I think 61-second YouTube video where we explain what that alert is and what to do about it and how to fix it. So we're trying to get you as fast as possible to the point where you can resolve an alert. In that case, like it's not like we want to give you an explanation for it, not just show you the right data, but we want to also like explain it really quickly. And if I go down here, then we have like
yes, and
we have stuff related to jobs that failed. We have stuff related to nodes that aren't ready, and we pull in some specific data there. So for each of these things, we're pulling in the right data. That's the data you need to see. So one last example I'll give is, let's say your node file system is filling up, and you're running out of disk space on your node. Then we'll pull in a graph of the disk usage and other data to analyze the disk usage and understand why it's filling up and what containers are using that up and so on. So like this is the power of runbook automation, to take those events that happen, like if you remember the example we gave at the beginning, to take this box with radioactive material and tell you, okay, well, why is there a box with radioactive material, and does that need your attention or not?
Yes, absolutely. Another question, like I think, yes, yes, absolutely. Another thing I think, like I try to ask.
Oh, sorry, it was on my end. When my cat walked over my keyboard, she hit the mute key.
Okay. So I just asking you, I think there are some capabilities exist in Robusta. Let's say somebody tap into my ingress controller, and Robusta notifies me, like somebody like try to access the ingress controller, add arbitrary YAML file inside the ingress controller, and then Robusta identifies those, and plus it's alerted me somebody tap into your ingress controller. So how this is done? Can you give us some small intro of this?
Yeah, so one thing that I can do is like go over here, and let me just go to a specific example. Let me find that. Oh, here we go. So one thing that we make easy to do, we don't define that. Okay, so that's an example of something that we don't define out of the box. We don't define out of the box because if we put in there a default alert where you say like get notified when someone changes the ingress controller, then some people would go and they change the ingress controller. They say, well, you know, it's not technically an error. Like, why are you notifying me on that, right? So we try and notify you on stuff that you have to know about. Not everyone wants to be notified on the ingress controller, but some people do. So here I'll show you how you can easily configure it. So we let you easily define these rules. You can say here on deployment update, or for the ingress controller, it would be on ingress controller update. You can specify here exactly which fields you want to monitor, or you can monitor the entire ingress controller. And then by default, the data from here, like with a diff of what changed, will be sent to you in Slack. And again, you could also set it up and send it to a specific Slack channel or notify a specific person if you wanted.
Yes, that is very very cool. And plus, awesome. Another thing I want to I'm thinking about here, like if you look at the cloud native container runtime tools like Falco, or some of the people are using eBPF, they look at the traces, how the system call appearing into it. So can do you think like Robusta can integrate with those cloud native runtime tools, and plus modify to alert you and tell you what the right way for the fixation of this kind of security alert?
Yeah, so there's two. So we've heard a lot about it recently. It seems like every time I go on a podcast or have an interview with someone, I get asked about this now. So there's definitely something interesting here. Um, I've been asked a few times now about taking different security events that occur, for example, with Falco, and then taking those security events and automatically running a runbook automation to remediate them. So, like an example that I've heard a few times now is there's an issue that occurs on a certain node. Maybe I want to go and I want to cordon that node automatically, or I want to go and drain pods that are running on that node. So there's definitely a lot of interest around this. In general, we focus a lot on like our core mission in the observability space. But if someone is listening to this and is interested in the security use cases, we are doing some work with partners around this area. I don't have anything to announce yet, but then please feel free to reach out. There might be something interesting here that we can get you involved in.
Yes, another cool thing that I'm thinking about here is we see there's a policy engine like Kaverno and Open Policy Agent. If we see some of the YAML code is already changing and always taking the production system down, if somebody put the same YAML file again into the production system, because now we know this four lines of YAML, now we know there's a four lines of YAML file causing the production to outage. Now like policy engine like Kyverno can restrict people to apply those policies, apply a policy that can restrict this YAML to be deployed on the Kubernetes cluster. So either I think about like we can keep track of all the YAML, all the configuration changes that happen inside the Kubernetes cluster, and then make it available to the policy engine that people cannot deploy those policy code into it. And another way to then think about is like how we can integrate Robusta plus a policy engine to get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, so we already have that database today. Like I already have this database here of every single change that was made inside my cluster. I can just filter it here and um, let's take only updates to my cluster. Now I'm only looking at changes that people made. If I zoom in, I can see there's actually two changes here, view two events. And I can see exactly what was changed when. So we already have like the database to enable that sort of stuff. We don't yet have the integration with OPA or with any of the policy engines, but it's not hard to imagine that sort of integration because all the data here to track exactly what changed and have that rich YAML diff is already here in Robusta. So we already have all the data on what happens and that historical records.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. We can track the changes between what is previously uh, there and what causes the system to get applied. So it's basically been there.
Yeah. So I think I've spoken a little bit about some of the core stuff I think that's new in Robusta. Just to finish off the picture, maybe, then I'll say that we're doing a lot of work as well around jobs and how to track jobs in Kubernetes that fail, and doing a lot of work also around node health and other stuff over there. So this is a topic that people are interested in or would love to hear more about. Like, please reach out to us as well. We love to hear from people and to understand, especially if you're using Robusta today, how we can improve it and how we can give you a better experience. And if we have a moment, it's okay. I'd like to touch a little bit on one new effort that we're doing that's purely educational. It doesn't tie into the product, but that's purely educational that I'm running with Pawan Gudiwada. about why this Kubernetes thing, if that's okay. Are you with me? Okay, so I'm gonna just, if it's okay, I'm gonna say a word or two on that. So one thing that happens a lot is like we get a lot of questions from people also about why Kubernetes sometimes functions a certain way, or why Kubernetes is doing something that's weird, or why there's like a certain overhead to do something that seems like was almost easier before Kubernetes. So one thing that we're trying to do is to really take that data and then to break it down into like why Kubernetes was even built the way it's built. And the way that that looks is we have here a new Substack and a new newsletter that we're doing, Why This Kubernetes Thing, where we're speaking about these different concepts in Kubernetes and trying to break them down and really simplify it. So that's just a new effort that we're doing that's purely educational that I wanted to briefly touch on over here. And I hope that will be useful for people who are watching this. Now, I think we've lost Saeem temporarily, but do anyone have, if people have questions, please leave questions in the chat. I'm looking now at the chat here as well, and I'm happy to answer any questions that people have. Let me see if I can also check the chat on YouTube to make sure I'm not missing anything. Also check the chat on YouTube to make sure I'm not. Hi, are you back?
Sorry, Natan, I don't know what happened to the SteamYard, but I think it's updated. What happened? I couldn't able to figure out what happened. But thanks you for hosting the show and plus getting the things out. But before I let you go, you you done multitasking today. You done multitasking today, but I don't know what happened to the StreamYard. I think I got updated, but it's got fluctuated on my side. It's not your fault, but it's fluctuated on my side. But sorry for that. Sorry for the audience for the delay. But did a wonderful job of hosting and presenting at the same time. So before I let you go, Natan, final words, because this year is going to the closing the end. So what next is in the plan for the next year, and what's next is coming up? Because I see already there's a updated website, updated blog. There is KubeCon talks available. There is a new guy in your team that's called Pawan who writing wonderful blog posts, and you also hiring new people for your team. So much stuff coming up. So now tell us like what next is actually appearing on the Robusta.
So we're doubling down. We're doubling down on the stuff that we're doing and that we're doing well. And we're taking a lot of feedback, gotten a ton of great feedback in recent months from people who are using the platform on a daily basis about what they want to see. And the best way to tell us that is to either message us in Slack or open an issue on GitHub so that everyone can participate in the discussion. So there's live requests there that we've gotten, and we want to just take that feedback and double down on what we're doing and do it even better. And we are hiring, like you mentioned. So I mean, we're looking for people to join the team, and specifically right now, we're hiring for a bunch of front end positions, and we're hiring remote anywhere in the world. So if you have over 3 years of experience with Vue and JavaScript, then please reach out. I mean, there could be a fit. And thank you so much again for having me.
Yes, no, thank you very much for hosting and doing all the hard work on the Robusta, explaining all the wonderful details. And sorry for being doing multitasking on today's show because there's a technical difficulty on my end. But you did a wonderful job in hosting, and I think Natan, the person for you to learn about Prometheus Robusta, it's a wonderful team. He's building up for the people. So please join us on Twitter and ask question about it. And some of the questions that I shared, if you are interested in having those conversations, want to see the platform is actually built, those policy engine, the security capabilities, or they want to see the backstage integration with Robusta. So please hit a star and go to the GitHub issue, create a GitHub issue on the Git repo, and I think Natan is happy to incorporate those changes as well. But we definitely keep our collaboration journey again in the next year or upcoming episode of Cloud Native FM. But thank you very much, Natan, for being a wonderful introduction to the always player talking to you. Always learned a lot by talking to you when you sharing your knowledge with me because I learned a lot. And also all the tweets that you share with the general audience is really helps a lot of people. So thank you very much for being stay everyone who stay at the end. So there is so much learning resources available on the description of this YouTube channel. There is a Natan's out Q Talk and all the links to the YouTube channels, all the videos on the blog, and all the DevOps Toolkit channel videos links available in this YouTube description. So please join and stay safe and stay healthy. Have a wonderful day. Watch us for the cloud.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day, everyone. Bye bye. Bye bye.